Welcome, and thank you for joining us. And again, I always want to appeal to you that if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, please just let me know. You have the area in the comments section, both on Facebook and on YouTube. Really appreciate whatever you have to share. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And this is our last foray for the week into this first Parsha of Dvarim. And here we go. We're still on chapter 1. As you can see, it's a relatively long chapter, but there's been a lot of commentary on each of the verses, most of them anyway. So the context of where we are right now is that they're on the outskirts of Canaan, of the land of Canaan. They're there and they come to Moses and they say, let's send in scouts. This is not a bad idea. Okay, doesn't sound like a bad idea, to check out and to see what we're going to have to encounter. I don't think strategy is a bad idea. And knowing ahead of time what you're going to encounter is a bad idea. This all sounds pretty good. On the other hand, of course, God has said to them, this is what they're to do. And God has given them reassurances that God is going to help them significantly make this possible. This is a promise God made to their patriarchs. Vayitav be'enai hadavar. So, understandably, this matter was good in my eyes, literally, right? This appeared to me like a good idea. Ve'ekach mikem shnei masar anashim, and I took from you 12 men. Ish echad lashavet, one man to a tribe. Again, notice the sense of equity going on here, that to make sure that every tribe got representatives, a representative in this case. However, we'll see. Vayitav be'enai hadavar, Rashi has to say on this. This matter seemed good in my eyes, or was good in my eyes. Be'enai, but it says be'enai, in my eyes. Be'enai velo be'enei hamakom. So the emphasis on my eyes, in my opinion, it was my opinion, but not the opinion of the one above, right? Above, not God's idea, not God's eyes. Ve'im be'enei Moshe haya tov. But if it was good, if Moses thought this was a good idea, lama amra betochachot, okay, why was this mentioned in the corrections? Why? In other words, we're talking about the book of Deuteronomy here. If this was a good thing, if Moses thought this was a good thing, and Moses is giving the speeches here, why is he mentioning it? So he says, this is an interesting take. Mashal la'adam shomer lechavero. The example can be given, the illustration is a man who says to his neighbor, Mechor li chamorcha zeh. Sell me this donkey of yours. Sell me this donkey. And he's showing him which donkey he wants to buy, right? Amarlo, so his friend says, hey, he says, okay, we'll do. No, sorry, ata li nisayon. So he says, the person who wants to buy it says, will you give it to me for a test drive, right? As a test, l'nisayon. Will you allow me to test out the donkey? Amarlo, hey. So the friend says, sure, no problem, go for it. Baharim ugvaot, in the mountains and in the valleys, in the high places, in the rocky areas. That doesn't say rocky. Harim and Giv'ah, they're all referred to high areas, mountains, hills, mountains and hills. Amarlo, hey. So his friend says, of course, sure, hey, yes. Kevan shera'a she'ein ma'akvo klum. Okay, so when the purchaser, saw that his friend wasn't trying to prevent him from anything regarding this purchase, if he wanted to test out this purchase, Amar halokeach belibo, so the purchaser thought to himself, Batuahu ze shelo imtza bomum. He says, the seller has to be certain that I'm not going to find any problem, right? Any fault with this donkey. Miyad amarle. So the guy who wanted to purchase it said to him, Tol ma'otecha, here, take your money. Ve'eni minasho, and me'ata. And he says, and I'm not going to test out the donkey now. So let's see. Sorry. Again, this is a question of where to put the comma. So there's a period here. Me'ata, and from this we see af ani hodeti ledivrechem, and I too, this is Moses now, right? Who says, I too acknowledge your words, right? Shema tachazru bachem, in the hopes that you would retract your initial request. In other words, the reason why Moses agreed in the first case was to try and reassure them and hope of reassuring them so they wouldn't actually have to do it. That this illustration that we have is illustrating the psychology behind what was going on here. Keshetiru, that you'll retract your initial request. Keshetiru she'enim akev, when you see that I'm not preventing you in any way. I'm not opposing you at all. I'm not trying to hold you up. V'atem lo chazartem bachem, but you didn't change your minds. You decided regardless that you were going to do it. And that's why this all turns out the way it does. Va'ikach mikem, and I took from you min habrurim, from the choicest shebachem, amongst you. And generally when it says anashim, it refers to people of choice rank, people who are worthy, people that you would look up to when it uses the term anashim. So, minha misulatim shebachem. Okay. So this is from the word solet, right? Solet is a word that you use to describe fine flour, choice flour. So he's using that word to mean, right, the best of the best, right? That's from this word solet. Shnei masar anashim. So since he says 12 anashim, ish echad lashevet, a man to a tribe, magid. So this lets you know, shelo haya shevet levi imahem. This tells you, of course, how many tribes were there. We know that the tribe of Joseph split into Ephraim and Manasseh, and that meant there were actually 13 tribes. So we now know that the Levites did not participate in this particular scheme. So apparently, and maybe because they were related, they were Moses' family, more direct family, that they trusted Moses on this. Who knows? But the point is that the Levites were not included in this. And I wonder, as we're sort of doing this together, whether or not the Levites would have been included then in this, in the consequences that happen. And by the way, the timing is interesting because to reaffirm that Tisha B'Av, this fast that is coming up Saturday night, this darkest day in Jewish history that we mourn, right, is a remembrance of this event. It is not the golden calf. It is, in fact, this particular moment of not having sufficient faith in God to trust God, that God would see that they were successful in achieving this. So let's keep going here. Vayifnu, they turned, Vaya'alu hahara, and they went up, these 12 men went up the mountain, right, to the mountain. Vayavo ad Nachal Eshkol, and they came to the Wadi Eshkol, right? Vayiraglu ota, and they spied it out, this Wadi Eshkol area. Let's find the place here, right? Ad Nachal Eshkol, until Nachal Eshkol, Wadi Eshkol. And again, this is, I believe, this is all from, I believe, the Sifrei, this commentary on Deuteronomy. Magid shenikra al Shem Sofo. So an Eshkol is a cluster. And this wadi didn't necessarily have the name Eshkol at the time, because we refer to the cluster of grapes that the spies brought back. You may recollect the tourist ministry in Israel had a trademark of two men carrying a large cluster of grapes on a pole, and that's Eshkol Anavim, right? This cluster of grapes. And Rashi is simply telling us that this name that this wadi has at this point is named about the end of what happened at the end. In other words, after the spies went and picked this large cluster of grapes from this area, I'm assuming, right? V'yiraglu ota, and they spied it out. And of course, this word regel is in there, and the word regel means a foot, right? So we'll see. Melamed, so what this verse teaches you, shehalchu ba arba'a omnin, that they went in 4 lines. They took 4 lines, sheti va'erev, back and forth, and up and down. Sheti va'erev is a reference to weaving, right? The warp and the woof threads. And this is telling you that they went up and down and across and back, etc., examining this area. How exactly that works, I am not catching myself at this point. I know that possibly the fact that there is some emphasis here on regel, that they're using this term, and we know Latour also means to spy out, and whether or not it's because the Torah is using the specific word that Rashi or the Sifrei is pulling out, deriving this particular interpretation. Let's keep going here. Okay, we're onto this verse 25. Vayikhu b'yadam mipri haaretz, and they took with their hands, right? They themselves took from the fruit of the land. Vayoridu elenu, and they brought it down to us. Vayashivu otanu davar, and they brought back word to us. Vayomru, and they said, Tova haaretz, the land is good, asher HaShem Elokeinu noten lanu, which the Lord our God is giving us. Now, if you look at these words more carefully, this isn't sounding like the kind of stuff that we've already read about what the spies did. Back in the book of Numbers, in Parshat Shlach Lecha, we read about the original incident. And here, look at this. First of all, they're using that we do know that the spies mentioned that the fruit of the land was good. But this additional little piece of saying that the Lord God is giving to us, right? Doesn't sound like that's what they all were saying, right? And that's the point that Rashi is going to pick up, because we know that 10 of the spies said, oh yeah, the land is good, but you'll never make it. And 2 of the spies said, that's not true, you will make it. So here we go. A couple of points to bring out of this particular verse. Vayoridu elenu, they brought it down to us. Magid, this tells you, she'eretz Yisrael, that the land of Israel, gavoha mikol ha'aratzot, is higher than all the other lands. So we know it is not geographically the highest location in the world. So it has to tell us the significance of the land of Israel. And at least from one point of view that I can think of, Of course, the land of Israel is significant in that it is the nexus point of Asia, Europe, and Africa. And it's possible that that's what it's trying to point out, that the significance of the location of the land of Israel geographically in terms of ultimately constructing the temple there, that's why the temple was built there. So, and the next part of that verse, Vayomru tova haaretz, and they said, the land is good. Mihem sha'amru tovata, but who was it who spoke of the goodness of the land? Yehoshua v'Kalev, Joshua and Caleb. So Moses isn't quoting all of them here. He is simply quoting Joshua and Caleb, who did in fact say this whole piece, essentially, that the land was good and that God was going to make it possible for them to inherit this land. Next verse. Velo avitem la'alot, but you did not desire to go up. So obviously we have stuff that is missing here in terms of the narrative itself and how things actually played out. But clearly those 10 spies who dissuaded them were part of how they influenced everyone else not to take this chance and not to trust God. V'tamru et pni HaShem Elokechem, and you rebelled against the mouth, literally, of the Lord your God. Right? So just noticing from a literal point of view, the use of Adonai Eloheinu here and Adonai Elohechem here, referring to the relationship that we have to God. And when we talk about Adonai Eloheinu, this Eloheinu has to do with the trust and the loyalty that we have in God. And so they rebelled against the trust and loyalty we're supposed to have to God. Let's find where we are here. V'tamru, right? And you rebelled against. Lashon, he says, this has the connotation of hatrasa, of opposition, right? It's not just simply being stubborn, it's openly opposing, all right? And the word, this word tris, okay, has the meaning of shield. So in other words, putting up this shield and rejecting, right? As a shield rejects the arrows or the sword, etc. He trustem keneged ma'amoro. You opposed his word, God's word. You fought against it, in a sense, right? Next verse. Sorry, it looks like we still are, no, Kaf Zion, okay. 27. V'teiragnu ba'oholechem v'tomru, and you murmured, right, in your tents, and you said, V'sinat HaShem otanu. Look at this. It was because God hated, sinah is hatred, because God hated us. Hotzi'anu me'eretz Mitzrayim, he took us out of the land of Egypt, latet otanu, to place us into biyad, into the hand of Ha'emori, the Amorites, lahashmidenu, to destroy us, to wipe us out. That's what you said. And of course, if you think about it, that's exactly the reverse of what God had in mind. So some interesting commentary on this. V'teiragnu, you murmured. Lashon hara. This has to do with evil words, evil tongue, maligning, right? Quite literally. V'chein, and we have examples. Divrei nirgan, Adam hamotzi diba. So the words of a nirgan, of a slanderer, a person who brings out false reports. Now, Just this is exactly, or when I say false reports, we're talking about lies, bad lies. Besinat HaShem otanu, in that it was because God hates us. Look at by the way, forgive me, creativity, right, of trying to come up with falsifying what actually is going on here, right? Nothing new under the sun. Vahu haya ohev etchem. So Moses remembers telling them this, and he says, and in fact, he loved you, right? He actually was doing this out of love. Aval atim sonim oto. But you're accusing God of hating you. The truth is God loves you, and who hates who? The truth is you are hating God. You really hated him. Mashal Hediot, Rashi says, there's a common expression, a common proverb, Omer ma de belibach, you say what is in your own heart, al rachamcha, on the one who loves you, ma de belibe alach, what is in your heart about him. In other words, what you accuse someone else of is actually in your own heart. I was thinking of of course, the current situation and the big lie. And I remember as a child growing up with a proverb that went something to the effect that the fox knows its own hole. And that's exactly what this proverb that I learned as a child is referring to here, what it's saying here. So interesting. What you yourself are guilty of, you then, of course, transfer onto the person you're accusing. Besinat HaShem otanu, it was in an expression of how God hated us. Hotzianu be'eretz Mitzrayim, he brought us out of Egypt. That act of the Exodus from Egypt. And just think about that, right? And when God brought us out of Egypt, and the act of liberation, right? Hotzeto lesin'ah haita. Okay, that this or hotza'ato lesin'ah haita, that Exodus was out of hatred. And he explains how they were trying to support this claim. Mashal lemelech basar vadam. Again, this is a parable to a king of flesh and blood, in other words, a human king, shahayu lo shnei banim, who had two sons. This helps us understand why they were saying this, or how they were trying to support what they were saying. Veyesh lo shtei sadot, and this king has two fields. Achat shel shki'ah, one that is a watered field, is natural water that waters the field, the achat shel baal, and one requiring irrigation, one that you need to go to trouble, in other words, to irrigate the field. Lami shehu ohev, so if he has a preference for one son over the other, the one he loves, noten shel shki'ah, he gives him the field that is watered, ulamisha hu soneh, and the one whom he hates, noten lo shel baal, he gives him the one that he's going to have to irrigate. Eretz Mitzrayim shel shkiyahi, he says, and they were saying here that the land of Egypt is a watered area. Shenilus ula umashke ota, because every year, we know annually, the Nile would overflood its banks and water the areas surrounding the Nile. For Eretz Canaan, but the land of Canaan, shel Baal, that the land of Canaan requires irrigation. The Hotzianu mitzrayim, and he took us out of Egypt, latet lanu et Eretz Canaan, to give us the land of Canaan. So we see, here's the proof, that God really hates us because he took us out of this watered area of Egypt and sent us to occupy the land of Canaan. And of course, notice all the context or lack of context and how you limit the situation to what you want to limit it to. And this is how you manage to get excuses and bad thoughts and bad reflections and false accusations, etc., etc. Here, I think we have today an example of how nothing new under the sun, how while things may have changed from a technological point of view, human nature has not changed. And when you don't bother to deal with that, you get the repetitions going on. So very, very interesting. We're going to stop here. I think this is actually maybe not a bad place to stop at all. And with God's help, we will continue next year. And we'll mark the place right here. Right? The tragedy is we have the tools to make this world a perfect, wonderful place, and we don't. And that's back in Genesis, early Genesis, with the story of Cain and Abel and how that is an example of what we're talking about here. And I have to say that if we were to take an attitude of kindness to what we want to accomplish, we might get things done in a very different kind of way. And I'll stop the share here. Any thoughts or comments on today's lesson?
I was just wondering about Moses giving the new generation all these things from the beginning of Egypt all the way to Moab across the Jericho. He telling him how bad some of the Jewish, the farmer people were against God, and don't do that when you go into Israel. Be very careful what you do. No idols. Don't, he's trying to say, don't do what you're supposed to do. Do what you're supposed to do. In other words, obey the commandments. That's what he's trying to say. But it's the war between Og and HaShem and all the other. They went through that. The real generation, they should know better. But things happen again in Israel. So I don't know. It repeats sometimes itself, but we are a stubborn Jewish people.
Well, that's they say the reason why we have 613 commandments is because we're that stubborn.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I think we see it going on in the world in general. I don't know that the Jewish people are any more stubborn than others. You look at the time period that preceded World War II and Nazi Germany and stuff like that. And
I almost lost religion, Rabbi.
Yeah.
I almost lost religion because of the 6 million Jews being killed. I said, where's God? I couldn't figure that one out. I still can't figure that one out.
Well, because this isn't what it's all about. Yeah. Lauren, did you want to say something? You've got to unmute, please.
I was saying goodbye.
Okay. So I think that's what we need to do. All right. Take care. Be well, everyone.